Welcome to Bigfoot Adventures. Have you ever had a Bigfoot sighting? If you have and you don't want to let anybody know that it was you that saw them, or you're afraid to tell your story because you're afraid of you being made fun of, I'd be glad to tell your story for you. All you have to do is email me your story at bigfootadventures411@gmail.com. Let me know what you want me to say, what you don't want me to say, and I can put your story out there so other people can hear about it without you being identified. This next story is pretty interesting. It comes out of Cedar Key, Florida. Cedar Key is a little town that sits right on the Gulf of Mexico. It's a tiny town, not very big at all. And there's a landowner out there that was hearing wood knocking on his property. This gentleman, he owns 50 acres in the middle of millions of heavily wooded acres, surrounded by state management areas. He said when he unlocks his gate, it takes 3 miles in the woods just to get to his acres. He said his best friend and him were sitting on the front porch of the cabin and they were hunting wild boar one night. It was about 2 to 3 a.m. when they started hearing what sounded like 2x4s slamming together. He said the lumber cracked so hard and it was so loud, he thought it was trespassers. So he screamed out, "Hey, you're trespassing." He expected somebody to answer him, but nobody answered. About 10 to 20 seconds later, he would hear the cracking of the wood again, and it was even louder. So he started getting really nervous. He stood up again and he yelled, "Hey, you're on private property." He said he really thought somebody was going to answer back or yell back to him, and nobody ever yelled back to him. About 10 seconds later, he heard the loudest crack he ever heard. Him and his friend were frightened that something that was that close to the house, even though they were sitting there with firearms, they were still frightened. This went on for about a half hour of this cracking, really loud, what sounded like 2x4s cracking together over and over. Well, he never could figure out what it was. He never could see what it was because it was so dark out there. But then a few years later, a farmer told him that he knows what that cracking noise is. And he told him that there's a creature that makes that noise, and it's a Bigfoot. He said they have been doing this since the Indians were around to notify each other that the Indians had corn down by the river. This was their way of telling you to prepare them some corn. They would communicate to the Indians this way, and the Indians would leave corn out for them. Now, this gentleman said that he does bring apples and corn out, and that night while they were hunting hog, they had corn out. He said later on, a few years later, his girlfriend heard the same thing about 4 a.m. in the morning, and it woke her up out of a dead sleep because it was so loud. Well, he never told his son about this because he never wanted to scare him. But a few years after that, his son came in the house. He said, "Dad, there's some eyes glowing out there in the woods, and I think that they're like 8 feet off the ground." So the father went out there. He could see the light of the eyes shine, and he could see that they were really wide set, but he couldn't see what it was. He still couldn't see it. But his neighbor, that's a farmer, says they see them all the time over where he lives, which is not too far from where this gentleman lives. So I thought this was an interesting story. I know there was two twin girls that were driving to Cedar Key that had a Bigfoot sighting where one walked across the road in that same area. And I've been out there many times. I have a friend that lives up that way, and it is so dense. And I mean, there's really nothing there. It's all forest. So I thought this was really cool. Um, I never knew this thing about the corn with the Indians, so That's a whole new thing. I hope you enjoy my stories, and I appreciate you listening and watching. And until next time, I'll see you then.